I was officially the 10th man to date Clara Montgomery, who happened to be the wealthiest woman in the entire country. Because of her history, the internet was flooded with speculation, mostly people placing bets on how long it would take for her to get rid of me. Yet, a month after we started seeing each other, a video clip somehow leaked and spread everywhere. It showed her in a surprisingly vulnerable moment, crying and actually calling me her husband. Suddenly, I was the main topic of conversation online. Most people were just waiting for me to be publicly humiliated. Today was the day Clara was expected to end things with me. It was widely known that none of her relationships ever made it past the 7-day mark, and today was, in fact, my 7th day with her. The online forums were active with comments like, "Waiting for Alex to get dumped." Someone else wrote, "Alex isn't that handsome or well-built. He deserves to be dropped." Reading those, I couldn't help but laugh. I nudged the woman sitting next to me and raised an eyebrow. "So, I'm hearing rumors that you're planning to break up with me." Immediately, a strong arm wrapped around my waist, pulling me in close. Clara Montgomery looked up at me with those mesmerizing eyes and offered a soft smile. "What's the matter? Are you already tired of me?" she whispered, her voice clear and melodic right next to my ear. I looked down, and her stunning face filled my view. In that instant, I recalled everything people said about her online. She was beautiful, incredibly wealthy, commanding, and ultimately, heartless. The consensus was that Clara Montgomery had never genuinely loved anyone. Every man who came into her life was just a temporary diversion for when she felt bored. They said she could be ruthless, one minute being completely intimate with you, and the next finding a way to have you sent to prison. On the other hand, she was known for being unbelievably generous. Every time she ended a relationship, she reportedly gave the man a $10 million severance package. If I'm being perfectly honest, I was actually looking forward to receiving that $10 million. "We're attending a gala tonight," Clara smiled, handing me a heavy, gold-embossed invitation with her long, elegant fingers. "There's a surprise for you." I glanced down at her. "A surprise?" Clara's lips curved just slightly. "A very big surprise." I looked at the invitation she was holding and then back up at her face. "Oh, is it a breakup party? Does this mean my $10 million is finally on its way?" The gala Clara was hosting was filled with the absolute elite of high society. I was dressed in the black suit she had personally selected for me. As I turned around from the bar, I found myself standing directly in front of her most recent ex-boyfriend, Evan. Clara's current boyfriend meeting her previous one. In an instant, we were the absolute center of attention for the entire room. All eyes turned toward us. "Look, look! Alex is facing off with Evan," I heard someone whisper excitedly. "This is going to be good. Do you think they're actually going to fight?" Unfortunately for the onlookers, they were about to be very disappointed. The next second, Evan rushed toward me and pulled me into an enthusiastic hug. "Brother, congratulations on finally getting rich," he cheered. I clapped him firmly on the shoulder, grinning widely. "You too, man." I truly was on the verge of being wealthy. The thought of getting my hands on $10 million before the night was over had me feeling genuinely excited. The other guests at the party just stared, completely dumbfounded. "What just happened?" someone asked. "They didn't get into a fight? They hugged?" Evan and I just shared a look and smiled. The crowd didn't know that I was already good friends with all 9 of Clara's previous boyfriends, and they certainly had no idea that we maintained a private group chat. The name of the group was the Ex-Boyfriend Alliance. That chat had been active all day long. One of the exes wrote, "Congratulations on hitting the jackpot." Another posted, "Congrats on regaining your freedom." A third one added, "Congratulations on not having to be a substitute anymore." I smiled brightly at my phone. The truth was, Clara had a significant secret, one that revolved around a person who had gotten away. I had once been in Clara's private study and seen a portrait hanging there. It was a painting of a young boy who looked like he was only in his teens, but he was exceptionally handsome. Clara clearly treasured that painting and never allowed anyone to get near it. Her first 9 boyfriends had apparently never even seen it. The first time I saw the portrait, I was genuinely surprised. It wasn't just because the boy was good-looking, but because I looked almost exactly like him. We were so similar that even the small beauty mark near the corner of his eye was in the identical spot as mine. But I knew for a fact that I was not that person. It suddenly clicked for me that every single one of Clara's boyfriends, all 9 of them, bore some degree of resemblance to this boy in the painting. I just happened to be the one who looked the most like him. Clara was always telling me how handsome I was, how good-looking. I'll admit, I'm a reasonably attractive guy, but I'm not naive. She would often stare dreamily at the beauty mark by my eye. It wasn't until I saw that portrait that I understood. She was looking at me, but she was seeing the shadow of someone else. But after tonight, I wouldn't have to play the role of a substitute any longer. I'd always been cooperative and agreeable, and Clara had always been generous. I had already planned out exactly how I was going to spend that $10 million. Just as I was thinking about it, a significant commotion started near the entrance. A man dressed in an expensive white suit walked into the ballroom. "Julian Croft is here," someone announced. "Wow, he's the Croft heir, all right. He's incredibly handsome." Now that the Croft heir is back from studying overseas, the social scene finally has some real competition. If you ask me, Mr. Croft and Ms. Montgomery are the perfect match. Then someone else asked, "Hey, has anyone else noticed that Julian Croft and Alex look remarkably similar?" The moment those words were spoken, every eye in the room shot directly toward me. I just smiled and slowly turned my head to meet Julian Croft's intense, probing gaze. Julian Croft, the sole heir to the massive Croft fortune. He and I shared a very strong resemblance. "No way! Could Alex just be Julian Croft's stand-in?" Someone in the ballroom suddenly shrieked. The entire room burst into an uproar of whispers. "That explains it. No wonder Ms. Montgomery took a liking to Alex. It was all because of Julian Croft." "That's hilarious. How does an imposter like Alex even have the nerve to show his face in front of the real person?" "Exactly. Clara clearly threw this party specifically to welcome Julian back to the country. Alex being here is just a total joke." The nasty gossip easily reached my ears. Everyone was shooting me looks filled with contempt and mockery. Evan, standing beside me, clenched his fists in anger. "They're taking this way too far," he muttered. I just smiled and patted his shoulder to calm him down. "It's fine." I was much more concerned about whether I would be getting my $10 million. I really couldn't care less about anything else they were saying. Julian Croft, who was now the center of everyone's attention, kept glancing over in my direction. I gave him a lazy, indifferent smile, turned back around, and casually picked up a slice of chocolate cake from a passing tray. At Clara's galas, everything served was the absolute best of the best. It would be a complete waste not to eat it. "You're Alex?" A cool, detached voice spoke from right behind me. I slowly turned to see Julian, dressed impeccably in all white, standing there. His eyes were full of intense scrutiny, with a faint but obvious hint of hostility. "Julian, why are you even wasting your breath on him?" "Yeah, a total loser like him isn't worthy of speaking to you." The two men flanking Julian were desperately trying to flatter him by putting me down. "Alex, you need to leave Ms. Montgomery right now. A loser like you doesn't deserve her." Julian just stood there silently, letting his friends hurl these insults at me, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I looked down for a moment and chuckled. "I don't deserve Clara? And you two do?" Julian frowned, clearly displeased. He obviously hadn't expected me to talk back to him. His two suck-ups, however, became so furious that their faces turned bright red. "A goddess like Ms. Montgomery only deserves a man of talent and status like Julian." Exactly. Julian graduated from a top university overseas and is already being headhunted by major corporations. And you're just some imposter who happens to look like him. There's absolutely no comparison. Hearing their words, the look of displeasure on Julian's face slowly faded away. He glanced at me coolly. "A man should really know his place." "Know my place, huh?" I laughed. I laughed so hard I actually had to bend over slightly. "What are you laughing at?" Ben, one of Julian's cronies, clearly couldn't take it anymore. He stepped forward aggressively, raising his hand to slap me across the face, and Julian didn't even make a move to stop him. He just watched coldly. He was silently sanctioning the assault. My expression hardened instantly. I raised my hand and caught Ben's wrist mid-air. "Who the hell?" I asked icily, emphasizing every single word. "Do you think you are to hit me?" "Ow, that hurts! You bastard, let me go!" Julian's goon cried out in pain. I sneered at him. "Am I as pathetic as the bootlicker you are?" He froze, his face turning pale as he stared at me, completely speechless. Julian and his friends seemed completely shocked that I would actually fight back. They all just stared at me in disbelief. This was especially true for Julian. His face grew cold, and his icy gaze began to re-evaluate me. I glanced over at him and gave a cold smile. "I've always lived my life by a simple rule. Don't start trouble, but don't take it either. I don't like causing problems, but if someone comes at me aggressively, I won't just stand there and take the abuse." "Alex, let Ben go. I'll have him apologize to you," Julian said coldly. "Julian." Ben, still in my grip, looked at Julian in shock. "I don't want my welcome home party to be ruined." Julian shot him a look, a clear warning in his eyes. Ben flinched, pursed his lips, and nodded silently. He muttered reluctantly, "I'm sorry." I looked down and scoffed. Julian's welcome home party? Clara had insisted I dress up for tonight's gala, telling me she had a surprise just for me. Was this her big surprise? I glanced at Julian, then flung his friend's hand away from me. Touching him any longer would just dirty my own hands. "Ms. Montgomery is here! Ms. Montgomery is here!" A gasp went through the crowd, and all eyes immediately turned to the entrance. Clara, wearing a stunning custom-made black velvet gown, walked slowly through the door. "Ms. Montgomery must be here to see Julian." "This is the welcome home party she threw for him. Of course she's here to see him." "Right. Let's see how long Alex can keep up his act. He'll probably be dumped any minute now." Julian's eyes lit up, a clear hint of shyness and joy appearing on his face. The people around him immediately started congratulating him, not forgetting to take a few more verbal jabs at me. I lazily lifted my eyes and glanced at Clara, who was now completely surrounded by admirers. At home, she always wore casual clothes and liked to curl up on my shoulder like a lazy cat. This was the first time I had ever seen her dressed so formally. As Clara got closer, the smile on Julian's face grew even wider. I just smiled faintly and turned to leave the area. Suddenly, an arm tightened around my waist, and a bright, musical voice whispered directly in my ear, "My darling, where do you think you're going?" I looked down and saw that magnificent face just inches from mine. Clara's lips were curved into a smile as she gazed at me intently. Being naughty, are we? Didn't I tell you to wait for me at the party? Ignoring everyone else in the room, Clara nestled into my arms, her tone incredibly gentle and intimate. I glanced past her at the pale-faced Julian standing behind her, smiled, and wrapped my arms around her neck. I was getting bored without you here. Clara's lips curled, and she playfully tapped my nose. All right, I'll keep you company then. Everyone stared, completely dumbfounded. What is going on? Wasn't Clara supposed to dump Alex today? Yeah, this doesn't look like a breakup at all. Wasn't Alex just a stand-in for Julian? And isn't this party supposed to be Julian's welcome home celebration? At that, everyone turned to look at Julian. Under the weight of all their stares, Julian confidently walked step by step toward Clara. Clara, I'm back, he smiled at her, every movement exuding the practiced grace of a high society air. He was the very picture of a perfect gentleman. Clara, with her arm still securely around my waist, slowly turned and glanced at him. She just gave a lazy, It sounded incredibly dismissive. The confident smile on Julian's face froze in place. He clenched his fists, but his face remained fixed in that smile. Clara, thank you for throwing this wonderful welcome home party for me. As he said this, he shot me a triumphant look, as if to say, See? You're just the substitute. I'm the real deal. Who said this was a welcome home party for you? A cool voice, laced with ice, echoed through the suddenly quiet ballroom. Everyone was startled. Clara shot a frosty glare directly at Julian, her eyes filled with a clear warning. Julian's pupils constricted, the smile on his face finally cracking. Clara. But Clara didn't even look at him. Cradling me in her arms, she scanned the room and slowly announced, Welcome, everyone, to a celebration of my 1-week anniversary with someone special. I'd like to formally introduce you all to Alex, my boyfriend. She looked down at me in her arms, her eyes full of genuine tenderness. I was stunned for a moment. I hadn't expected Clara to make a move like this at all. So this entire party was actually for me? The guests all looked at each other in complete confusion. What's happening? Not only did Clara not break up with Alex, she just officially announced him as her boyfriend? That can't be right. None of her boyfriends have ever lasted more than 7 days. Julian must be so embarrassed. He said this was his welcome home party, but it was clearly for Alex. Julian's face was ashen, his expression one of pure, unadulterated disbelief. He bit his lip hard, looking at Clara with a heartbroken expression. But Clara didn't even spare him a single glance. She turned back to me, her lips curling. Boyfriend, care for a dance? I glanced past her at Julian. Our eyes met, and he shot me a look of pure animosity. I just raised an eyebrow and smiled. Of course. Julian and his fawning cronies were left standing awkwardly in the middle of the ballroom, not knowing whether they should stay or go. Clara's grip on me tightened slightly, her voice laced with a small hint of grievance. Are they more interesting to look at than I am? I chuckled and wrapped my arm more firmly around her. Of course not. Only then did Clara show a satisfied smile, leaning in to whisper in my ear, So, boyfriend, are you happy with your surprise? I paused. A surprise? To be honest, I was still a little sore about my missing $10 million, but getting to put Julian and his friends in their place like that was pretty satisfying. I smiled and planted a soft kiss on her cheek. Happy. Extremely happy. Clara's eyes tightened for just a second, Then she smiled and pulled me even closer. Clara, are you still mad at me for leaving without a word all those years ago? Is that why you're deliberately using him to get back at me? A grief-stricken voice suddenly came from behind us. Clara frowned in annoyance and shot a cold look over her shoulder. There stood Julian, biting his lip and staring at Clara with a look of indignation. I raised an eyebrow at Clara. Should I step away? Clara just held me tighter. No need. Julian's face went completely white. He probably didn't expect Clara to give him zero consideration, even after he'd debased himself like this. Clara? Julian, there you are. I was just looking for you. A deep male voice sounded from behind them. I looked up to see a middle-aged man who bore a strong resemblance to Julian, standing there with an air of authority. His gaze was locked firmly on me. Dad. Seeing him, Julian looked instantly aggrieved. A flash of sympathy crossed the man's eyes. I gave a lazy glance. Mr. Croft, Julian's father, the legendary business titan known for his ruthless tactics. Was he here to back up his son? Mr. Croft patted Julian's shoulder before looking up at Clara with a slow, practiced smile. Clara, Julian is young and foolish. I'm sorry he's caused you trouble. Clara glanced at Julian, who was now being comforted by his father, and said without a single hint of politeness, He certainly caused a lot of trouble for my boyfriend. I trust you'll have a word with him when you get home, Mr. Croft. Her words hung in the air, and the guests all exchanged nervous glances. Even Mr. Croft himself was taken aback. Julian looked so wronged, his eyes turned red, as if he were about to burst into tears. Mr. Croft quickly recovered his composure. He looked at me, held firmly by Clara, and smiled. So this is your boyfriend, Clara? Julian has been very rude. I apologize on his behalf. His words were polite and impeccable, leaving no room for complaint. I smiled softly. It's fine, Mr. Croft. But children do need to be disciplined. Parents can't protect them forever, right? I looked at him, my smile unwavering. Mr. Croft paused, his eyes studying me intently for a moment, before he suddenly smiled. You're right, Alex. I will discipline him. Julian glared at me angrily and was about to say something, but Mr. Croft stopped him. He looked at me and Clara, gave us a nod, and then led Julian away. Clara looked up at me and smiled. Feel better? I looked down into her enchanting eyes and smiled back. I felt better, sure, but the thought of my $10 million going down the drain still stung just a little. Unsurprisingly, I was trending online again. Clara Montgomery and Alex and Julian Croft, and Clara Montgomery's boyfriend were all topics dominating the trending lists. The ex-boyfriend alliance group chat was also blowing up. One ex wrote, "Dude, you made it." Another, "You're a legend." A third, "You actually tamed Clara Montgomery. You're my hero." Evan added, "You guys have no idea. Watching Alex shut down Julian Croft in person was so satisfying. He really stood up for all of us." I rubbed my temples and typed a message into the group. But my $10 million is gone. Evan quickly replied, "Bro, think long term. You think the richest woman in the country is going to short you $10 million? The ex-boyfriend alliance?" A clear voice suddenly sounded right beside me. My hand holding the phone trembled slightly. I looked up and met Clara's smiling eyes. "Oh, that?" I blinked, trying to think of a plausible excuse. A hand with long, elegant fingers suddenly held out a bank card to me. I blinked, looking at her. What's this? Clara smiled and arched an eyebrow. A 1-week anniversary gift. It has 30 million in it. My eyes lit up. $30 million. The billionaire heiress was truly a billionaire heiress. So generous. You don't want it? Clara wiggled the card at me, raising her eyebrows. I want it. Absolutely. Of course I do. Hesitating for even a second would be disrespectful to $30 million. I immediately snatched the card from her hand, beaming. Clara laughed and pulled me into her arms, leaning her head on my shoulder. You little gold digger. I looked down at the bank card in my hand and murmured, for a lot of people, this amount of money could save their lives. I looked up at her, smiling as I wrapped my arms around her neck. You don't like me being greedy? Clara's gaze softened, and she pulled me tighter. As long as it's you, I love every part of you. Her beautiful voice drifted into my ear. My body trembled slightly. I smiled and held her even closer. I received an invitation from Mr. Croft. He wanted to have dinner with me, alone. Clara looked at me, her expression darkening slightly. Are you sure you don't want me to come with you? I took her arm and raised an eyebrow. Afraid I'll get bullied? Clara looked up at me, then suddenly smiled, reaching out to gently pat my head. I'm right here. Do whatever you need to do. I leaned in, kissed her gently on the cheek, and smiled. I'm going in. Clara watched me and nodded. I pushed open the door to the private dining room. Mr. Croft was the only one inside. He stood up, impeccably dressed and composed, and smiled at me. Alex, thank you for accepting my invitation. I sat down lazily, smiling back at him. How could I dare refuse an invitation from Mr. Croft? His expression faltered for just a second, but he kept the smile on his face as he slowly sat down. Alex, you look a lot like someone I used to know. He stared at me, as if he was trying to find some trace of something on my face. I looked down and chuckled. Just someone you used to know? I lifted my gaze, my eyes now cold as I looked directly at him. Mr. Croft's pupils constricted, the practiced smile on his face wavering. You really are Liam? Liam. I laughed. It had been such a long time since I'd heard that name. So long, in fact, that I'd almost forgotten I was once called Liam. Mr. Croft's expression changed dramatically. He muttered to himself, I should have known. The moment I first saw you, I should have known. You look so much like me. How could you be anyone else? He stared at me blankly. Liam, I'm sorry, Mr. Croft. My name is Alex. I smiled at him, devoid of any emotion. Liam, I'm your father. He looked at me with a pained expression. You still hate me, don't you? I laughed softly. Mr. Croft, you can't just go around claiming people as your family. Mr. Croft's body trembled, his face full of sorrow. Liam, back then I had no choice. No choice, I sneered. You mean the no choice, where I, your baggage, was an obstacle to you marrying into a wealthy family? So you did everything you could to get rid of me, even standing by and watching as I was abducted by human traffickers, right? I stared at him, my voice like ice with every word. Mr. Croft's pupils shrank in terror. You know? I laughed so hard that tears started to well up in my eyes. Yes, how could I not know? The day I was forced into the trafficker's car, I saw Mr. Croft hiding around the corner. He just watched as I was taken away, completely indifferent. In that exact moment, any bond between me and Mr. Croft as father and son was severed. While I was thrown into a dark cellar, starved, beaten, and tortured, where was Mr. Croft? He was in a sharp suit, marrying a rich heiress and becoming a wealthy, respected son-in-law. How could I possibly ever forgive him? Liam, I really did look for you back then. The moment you were taken, I regretted it. I called the police, I really did, but they could never find you. Mr. Croft covered his face in agony. I scoffed. And then you just comfortably married into the Croft family and became their precious Mr. Croft, right? Did you know that while they were forcing me to beg on the streets, your wedding was being broadcast on the big screens in the city? While I was being beaten nearly to death, the media was congratulating you on the birth of your son. Tell me, is that what you call regret? I stared at him with cold, hard eyes. Mr. Croft's lips trembled, but he couldn't say a single word. He bit his lip in anguish. Then, as if remembering something, he hastily pulled a bank card from his bag. Liam, I know I wronged you. This is 10 million. I glanced at the card in his hand and laughed. How generous of you, Mr. Croft. What is this, hush money? Mr. Croft flinched. No. He looked down, clutching the card tightly. After a long moment, he finally spoke. Liam, Julian is your brother. He likes Clara. I laughed. So it wasn't hush money. It was payment to get me to leave Clara. I smiled and took the card from his hand. I'll take the money, but I'm not leaving Clara. This money, it's a debt owed by the Croft family. I stared at him coldly, watching the panic flicker in his eyes. I smiled, turned, and walked away. The debt the Croft family owed was far from paid. The moment I stepped out of the room, I saw Clara's tall figure. She strode toward me and pulled me into a hug. Let's go home. Her bright, melodious voice sounded in my ear. Her large hand enveloped mine, the warmth from her palm spreading through me. I smiled slowly and let her lead me away. Back at her home, Clara watched me like a hawk. It was as if she was afraid I was going to do something drastic. I smiled and threw myself into her arms. What's wrong? No work today? Clara looked up at me and raised an eyebrow. If I still had to go to the office every day, what would I be paying all those people a high salary for? Charity? I burst out laughing. She certainly had a point. By the way, can you donate the money on this card for me? I handed her the bank card I'd taken from Mr. Croft. Clara took it and glanced at me. Donate it? I glanced at the card dismissively. It's dirty. Clara chuckled softly. Okay. I looked down at her, paused for a moment, and then said slowly, Aren't you going to ask me anything? Clara gently stroked my hair, her voice soft. You'll tell me when you're ready. I was stunned for a moment. Then I smiled and hugged her tightly. What did I ever do to deserve someone as good as Clara? That night, I received a few threatening text messages on my phone. Alex, you don't deserve Clara. If you don't leave Clara, you'll face consequences you can't handle. I looked at the messages and smiled. Consequences I can't handle? To be honest, I was kind of looking forward to seeing them. Clara pulled me into her arms and raised an eyebrow. What are you smiling so happily about? I put my phone away and grinned at her. I'll show you a good show later. Clara paused. Don't go too hard on them. I glanced at her. Worried I'll hurt your precious little angel? Clara playfully tapped my nose. I'm worried you'll hurt your hand. I smiled and snuggled into her arms. The next day, while I was out, a few men cornered me in an alley. They looked at me mockingly. You're not bad looking. No wonder you've got the richest woman in the country wrapped around your finger. I glanced at them lazily and smiled. Should I thank you for the compliment? The leader of the group was taken aback for a second, then laughed. You're an interesting one. Too bad someone paid me to teach you a lesson. Otherwise, I'd almost feel bad about this. I looked down and smiled softly. Before you teach me a lesson, can you tell me who hired you? Alex, you really are pathetic, hitting on just about anyone. A mocking voice suddenly cut in. I looked up to see Julian Croft walking slowly toward me. His face was filled with contempt. Alex, didn't I warn you to stay away from Clara? You wouldn't listen, so don't blame me for this. He stood directly in front of me, his face a mask of derision. I looked up at him, and suddenly I smiled. What are you laughing at? Julian's eyes grew cold, his expression annoyed. At this moment, his face was contorted with jealousy, with none of the practiced grace of a high society air. I looked at him lazily, my gaze turning icy. Julian, do you really think no one will ever find out what you've done? Julian flinched, looking at me with confusion. I stared at him and said, word for word, 1 year ago, at a crosswalk, you hit a woman. Julian's pupils shrank. How do you know that? I sneered. If you don't want anyone to know, don't do it in the first place. Did you think running off to another country would make it all go away? Or did you think the Croft family could cover up everything for you? Let me tell you, you committed the crime, and you will face the punishment. Julian's eyes flickered. He stared at me, squinting. How the hell do you know all this? I looked at him and said coldly, the woman you hit was my mother. When I escaped from the traffickers all those years ago, she was the one who kindly took me in. She was such a kind, gentle person, yet Julian hit her with his car and left her in a vegetative state. And the culprit, Julian, got away scot-free, fleeing overseas to become a celebrated young master. Julian suddenly burst out laughing, a wild, unrestrained laugh. So it was your pathetic mother. Like son. Both of you are just as annoying. So what if you know the truth? What can you do to me? Besides, do you really think Clara will still want you after today? He laughed mockingly and gestured to the men he had brought with him. The men slowly closed in on me. I slowly looked up at Julian and smiled. Julian, congratulations! You're now the disgrace of the entire elite circle. As I spoke, I held up my phone. Julian looked at my phone and suddenly froze. You bastard, what did you do? I smiled coldly. Just broadcasting your crimes, to the public, of course. That's right, I was live streaming. Julian had no idea that his entire confession had just been seen by the entire internet. By now, it was probably the #1 trending topic. Julian was furious. You bastard! If I'm going to hell, I'm taking you with me. If you want your money, get him now! He screamed at the men behind him. The men hesitated for a second, exchanged glances, and then rushed toward me. Alex, you're finished! The whole world is about to see you get beaten to a pulp. You think Clara will still— Julian was gloating when he suddenly stopped mid-sentence. How is that possible? The menacing thugs were now all writhing in pain on the ground. I lazily retracted my leg and dusted off my hands. It had been a while since I'd had to fight. I was a little rusty. Julian stared at me in terror. How is that possible? How could you? I looked down and smiled. Did Julian think I was some weak scholar? Sorry to disappoint him. Someone who could escape from human traffickers was hardly helpless. Add to that the years I spent training in Taekwondo. These goons Julian hired were nothing to me. The sound of police sirens grew closer. Soon, several officers ran over and restrained Julian and the men on the ground. Julian glared at me like a madman. Alex, you just wait. When I get out, I'll make you pay. I laughed. A loud laugh. Did Julian naively think the Croft family could still save him? Too bad. The Croft family probably couldn't even save themselves right now. I picked up the phone from the ground, opened the news, and held it in front of his face. Julian looked down, and his pupils shrank in disbelief. How? How could the Croft family go bankrupt? I looked at him coldly. Did you think no one would ever find out about all the dirty things your family has done? The Croft family built their fortune on shady business. Over the years, they had ruined countless families. Did they really think they would never be punished? I glanced at Julian and gave a cold smile. Julian, you were right about one thing. A scumbag and a scumbag's father are both equally disgusting. Julian flinched, looking at me with confusion. But I looked past him to the person standing just behind him. Mr. Croft was standing there, his face pale. "Dad, save me!" Julian turned and saw Mr. Croft, shouting as if he'd found his savior. But Mr. Croft just looked at me, his face full of sorrow. "Liam, is this what you wanted to see? Brother against brother, family turned against each other?" "What brother? What family? Dad, what are you talking about?" Julian was completely bewildered. Mr. Croft looked at him and sighed deeply. "Julian, he's your brother." "What?" Julian looked as if he'd been struck by lightning, his face a mask of shock. I shot a cold look at Mr. Croft. "You're mistaken. My mother only had one child, and my mother is still lying in a hospital bed, unconscious, because of your precious son." Mr. Croft's body trembled, his lips quivering as he struggled to speak. I didn't look at him again. I walked straight toward the figure at the end of the street. Someone was waiting for me there. Clara stood there smiling as she pulled me into her arms. She whispered softly, "You did well. It's all over now." I slowly raised my hands and hugged her back. "Yeah, it's over." The Crofts, both father and son, were sent to prison. Julian, the golden boy of the elite, had fallen just as hard as he had been lifted up. He became public enemy number one. I put down my phone and turned to the person in the hospital bed. I whispered, "Mom, I got revenge for you. Please wake up soon." But my mother just lay there silently, with no reaction. I sighed. I suddenly felt that Julian had gotten off too easy. A pair of warm hands gently rested on my shoulders, and a clear voice said softly, "Don't worry. I've hired the best doctors in the world to treat her. She will definitely wake up." I turned to see Clara looking at me, her eyes full of tenderness. I smiled. "How did you know I was here?" I had never told Clara about my past. I had never told her about my mother. But somehow she knew everything. Clara took my hand, hesitated for a moment, and then said slowly, "I was afraid you would leave." I froze. I was afraid that once you finished what you had to do, you would just disappear. I was afraid you would run away from my world, and I would never see you again. I was afraid you would leave me. Clara pulled me in by the waist, her gaze intense. "Will you leave?" I looked at her, feeling a little guilty. To be honest, I had once thought about taking my mom and leaving after dealing with Julian and his family. But now, I looked down at her and suddenly smiled. "Ms. Montgomery, are you confessing your love to me right now?" Clara's eyes lit up, and she looked at me with anticipation. "If I confess, will you stay?" I smiled softly. "I will." Clara's eyes widened slightly. She pulled a small box out of her pocket and gently opened it. Inside, a beautiful ring lay on a velvet cushion. "Will you marry me?" Clara looked at me lovingly, her eyes filled with hope. I looked at her and curled my lips. "I'm very greedy, you know. Aren't you afraid I'll run off with all your money? If you're greedy, that makes things easy. Money is the one thing I'm not short on. You can have as much as you want. Besides, all my money is yours, and I'm yours too. Clara's beautiful eyes sparkled. So, will you marry me? I smiled and leaned close to her ear, whispering, I will. Clara's body trembled slightly, and then she hugged me tightly. She murmured softly, I finally caught my favorite star. I chuckled softly. I had also found the person I wanted to spend the rest of my life with, and she just happened to be the richest woman in the country. I think I really did hit the jackpot. A week later, the billionaire heiress got married. She threw a celebration that lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. She said she wanted everyone to know that she had married the boy she loved most. My ex-boyfriend alliance group chat was now renamed the Jackpot Club. Everyone in the group was congratulating me on hitting it big. I raised an eyebrow. You guys conspired with Clara to trick me. I haven't even dealt with you for that yet. The group chat went silent. Evan finally typed, We were just trying to help you achieve your dream of being a millionaire. I smiled. I found out later that Evan and the others were never actually Clara's boyfriends. They were just people she sponsored and supported. I smiled and sent a few large red packets to the group. Let's all get rich together. On the 7th day of our marriage, my mom woke up. The doctors said it was a medical miracle. But I knew it was a reward for all the good deeds my mom had done in her life. A month later, after I finished a physical therapy session with my mom, Clara ran over looking nervous. Honey, how's Mom doing? I glanced at her and put on a serious face. The doctor said you need to stop overreacting. It might affect the patient's mood. Clara's eyes lit up, then immediately dimmed. She looked toward the hospital room, her eyes filled with a sense of grievance. Honey, now that Mom's awake, am I going to lose your favor? I rolled my eyes at her. She just followed me with a silly grin, wanting to carry my bag, but not daring to. As we walked, she kept reminding me cautiously, Honey, you must be tired from taking care of Mom. Walk slower. Later, a video of the billionaire heiress Clara Montgomery following me around like a meek little wife, whining and calling me honey, was posted online. The whole internet was saying that the richest woman in the country was completely whipped. Clara's story. I fell in love with a boy. He was the light of my life when I was 14. At 14, I was kidnapped by human traffickers. In a dark, cold cellar, I was beaten until I was covered in wounds. I thought I was going to die. But in the darkness, a small hand took mine. Don't be afraid. Hold on. A young voice whispered in my ear. I looked up and saw a young face, covered in bruises, but he managed to give me a small smile. He said that staying alive was the most important thing. It was strange. In that moment, I was about to give up. But hearing his voice, I suddenly found the strength to keep going. He was very handsome, especially the beauty mark by the corner of his eye. It was so striking. He was smart and strong. He rallied all of us to play for time against the traffickers. Later, he found the right moment and helped all of us escape. I was saved. But when I tried to find him, he was nowhere to be found. I had lost him. I searched for him constantly, but there was no news of him. They say I had 9 boyfriends and none of them lasted more than a week. But they don't know the truth. Those 9 boys were all victims who had been abducted by traffickers back then. I found them only to ask for clues about his whereabouts. Later, at a gala, I saw Julian Croft, who bore a strong resemblance to him. Julian was always clinging to me, calling me Clara. But I knew he wasn't him. But why did he look so much like him? I had someone investigate, and discovered that Julian's father had another son before him. He was my star. I also learned the truth about how I was kidnapped. My heart ached for him. Later, I saw him again at the hospital. I was overjoyed. I found out that his adoptive mother had been hit by a car and was in a coma. And the culprit was Julian Croft. The Croft family had sent Julian abroad overnight. I knew he wouldn't let it go, so I decided to give him a little push. He must want to see Julian's downfall with his own eyes. I approached him myself. "Will you be my boyfriend?" My star looked at me, then smiled. "Sure. As the boyfriend of the richest woman in the country, you won't treat me badly, right?" I knew he was only getting close to me to get revenge for his mother, but I was ecstatic. I also knew he hadn't recognized me. I deliberately let him see the portrait in my study. He stared at it for a long time, completely silent. I thought he must have recognized me then. We never said it out loud, but we had a silent understanding. He asked me if I would still like him, even if he was greedy. How could I not? As long as it was him, I would love any version of him. I was actually terrified that once my star got his revenge, he would leave. But he accepted my proposal. I finally caught my favorite star. A note from Clara. "I'm so glad I met you. You gave me the courage to want to live, and I hope I can give you a lifetime of happiness.